All right, everybody, I think we're due for another vlog update video for Camper 9.0. I believe this is part 10. I've got the camper back out in the driveway. I'm still touching up some of the finish here, but this is just a few corrections I'm still making on the finish, but you guys can get the general gist of it here with the windows inside. I think the rear of this, let me wide angle this, particularly looks nice. There we go. I think that looks, sorry I'm backing up in the garage here. I think that's particularly looking really nice there. But let's take a look inside. All right, so we are inside and I've been mostly working on the insulation. And let's see, as a recap, yes, last video we just had the electrical done, so most of the insulation is in. As you can see, I don't have the roof panels fabric covered yet, but I guess that kind of gives you an idea of what they will look like. So let's do this. So I started off, these are EPS, expanded polystyrene foam panels. They're the ones that have the silver shiny stuff on one side. That's what they look like uncovered. And so I inserted those panels into all of the spaces in the framing, and that was 1.5 inches deep. Now I used a polyurethane-based adhesive made by Great Stuff, and I peel off the plastic backing on the EPS panels. So where it's just the styrofoam against the wood, using that polyurethane-based adhesive, that won't melt the EPS, but it makes a permanent bond between that panel and the plywood. And the bond is so strong that to rip it off, you would essentially break the, you'd start tearing apart the EPS because it's essentially permanent. Now, making that bond has a couple benefits, because what it does is it actually makes the, though the outside skin is quite rigid, it makes it virtually very rigid. It's, because you're essentially making a composite structure there, okay? But it also seals that inside from condensation. Now, the way the final product of this insulation on here will be is going to be a combination of a couple things. So this wall in front of you here is, you see the individual panels installed, wrapped in a fabric. That's a fabric called duck, and inserted in between the frame members. I will add some decorative trim later, but this wall is made that way. However, this wall over here is made in a different way. And guys, don't mind, there's a little bit of dust on everything. So I started off by inserting the panels without any fabric, kind of like you see here, in the frame structure of that wall. So it's 1.5 inches deep. Then I took a 1/2 inch sheet of EPS, wrapped it in the fabric, and used that same adhesive and mounted it to the wall. Now, this is the first time I've done it, or at least that I can recall doing that. And part of it was just to give another aesthetic look. So instead of having the wall broken up by the frame members, here it's just a continuous wall. There is a concept called thermal bridging, which would be like up there, that piece of framing. If the framing is exposed beyond the insulation, it's going to have less of an insulation effect. I think it's obvious because there's no insulation in front of it. To some extent, filling in the wall completely like this should reduce some of that thermal bridging. I'll be honest with you, it's not a significant concern of mine, but it is a benefit of doing that method. Up there, up in the upper portion there, those were hand-fit pieces of EPS wrapped in fabric. Behind that, some thin slit, like you see down there. So up in the angled corners and the roof, that also has thin slit behind the EPS. So those sections aren't bonded to the wall. And the reason I did that is I had a little bit more space, so I wanted to use it for extra insulation. And also, because of the curve and the unusual angle, it would make it very challenging to bond it to the wall. Now, along all of these frame members, there will be wooden trim that goes in there, and these lights will actually mount to that trim. But the whole package is using a combination of different kinds of insulation, mounted in a couple different ways, and I think it's going to give this camper some really good insulation factor. Let's actually pull this panel down, because right now these are just in there temporarily. But up here, you guys can see that thin slit, okay? Now this is the roof here, this is 2 inches, okay? And it's about 2 inches up to the thin slit. Like I said, there's a slight variation in height because of the curve in the roof, but this fits in there nicely, and it will give plenty of room for that thin slit to have an appropriate loft and give really, really great insulation capacity. Now, I showed this in a previous video, but the whole inside, that black part that you see there is thin slit. That cab over section will be closed off with cabinet doors at some point. The thin slit doesn't look bad. I wouldn't consider it like cosmetic, but because it's just going to be a storage area, I'm just going to leave that thin slit exposed. Down here, we've got some of the panels in there. I used a slightly different color fabric for conservation. I had some of that. That's still duck, the same type of fabric, just a different color. I had some on hand, and you got to remember that the bed platform will go across here, so this stuff underneath here will not be as readily visible. It still looks nice, and I think it's kind of a nice breakup of the color, but that's why I used it. You know, in a nutshell, that's about it. This is a lot of work. I touched on this, I believe, it was either in a live or in the last video, but I did want to talk about the lighting in here. Now, right now, it's just temporarily mounted. Like I said, once I get in the panels covered in fabric and the trim pieces up, those lights will mount to it. But lighting is so important. So I buy these flush mount puck lights. I use the warm tone. You can get I think it's called a cool white, but it's almost like a fluorescent tone. That's how I perceive it. But I like the warm tone. And one thing I've learned consistently is it's so important to have more lights than you think you need and to distribute them. So one of the lessons from 8.0 is I had used 3 larger lights going down the center, and it's fine, it's not horrible, but I just think using 6 smaller lights and distributing them side to side, and what you see there is roughly the orientation that would be, produces just a lot better of a light quality inside of the camper. And of course, you know, it's better to use more than less. I'll put these on a dimmer, or dimmer switch, of course, so that if they're too bright, I think they're going to be just fine in full power, but you could always adjust it down if you wanted to. So you guys will notice there's a different color fabric over there. Remember, that area will be boxed in with the secretary desk when this is done. So I did want some lighter fabric in there, just to kind of give it a break up and have that smaller space a little bit lighter in there. Some wires and stuff you see hang in there is just for future outlets and so forth. But coming along, a lot of work left, but getting this insulation in is a big project unto itself. So thanks guys for watching.